Welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast, where we discuss the science and art of the workplace, gain powerful insights, resources, and perspectives on the industries of human resources and recruiting. Join your host, Jessica Miller-Merrill, chief blogger at bloggingforjobs.com, for an in-depth and no-holds-barred look into the future of our most powerful business asset, the employee. And now, welcome your host, Jessica, with this podcast episode of WORKOLOGY.
Millennials are frequently generalized as entitled, lazy, and self-centered. Recent research shows us that that might not be the case. A 2016 SHRM employee job satisfaction survey that found that 86% of millennial employees were satisfied in their jobs compared to job satisfaction across the board, which was 88%. On this episode of the WORKOLOGY podcast, we're going to be continuing our podcast series on the 5 generations at work with millennial and career expert Penelope Trunk. Penelope is a serial entrepreneur with a background in journalism. She's the founder and CEO of Quistic, an online learning platform for people who want stable and engaging careers. She's one of my favorite writers and covers many topics, including careers and workplace, in addition to her articles on family, life, and homeschooling. Penelope, welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast. Is there anything about your background I might have missed?
No, you got it. You covered it all.
Awesome. You do such a good job of breaking down barriers and helping drive what I call uncomfortable situations or conversations on the topic of careers, millennials, and life. What's important right now?
Well, right now, millennials are, they're in charge. They're mostly running things because they don't have kids, but they've had enough experience that they can be in management. So the thing that I think a lot about is who's coming after millennials and what kind of trouble millennials are going to be in when they see the next generation. So, you know, every generation is faced with new tasks when younger people come in. So I think a lot about that, like how will millennials react to younger people coming in and what will their challenges be?
This podcast series is about our 5 generations at work: Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, Boomers, and Traditionalists. What kind of things do you think these generations want out of their jobs and careers? Is it the same or is it different?
Well, I think millennials went into the workforce thinking that entrepreneurship was really awesome, and there was so much written about like how bad it is to be unhappy and how entrepreneurship will make you happy and working for yourself will make you happy. And also millennials had seen their parents get totally killed in working for other people. So I think millennials spent a lot of time hemming and hawing about why aren't they entrepreneurs and beating themselves up that they don't have their own business, and kind of living in an alternative universe that entrepreneurship is the all end all thing. And I think the next generation is just not going to have any of it. Like, we've seen enough of the hardships of entrepreneurship that the next generation won't be so enamored with the entrepreneurial lifestyle, and they'll just go into work and take a paycheck and be really happy to have stability. And I think they're just not, like, they weren't raised by dreamers, and they're not going to be dreamers.
I think that's interesting because I had a Generation Z expert, Connor Blakely, on the podcast, and he's a 16-year-old guy. He's an entrepreneur, but he said the exact same thing. Like, they're going to go back into the workplace. They're not millennials, and they're tired of hearing about millennials starting their own businesses and doing their own thing.
Yeah, well, statistically, millennials don't start their own businesses and do their own thing. They just talk about it and tell each other about how great it is. They don't actually do it.
How do you think organizational leaders can help break down the generational stereotypes and go beyond just assuming millennials are all hoodie and flip-flop wearing slackers?
Well, they can promote the ones who aren't. So millennials right now are like entering their 30s. And so, I mean, whatever. If you like them, promote them. And if you don't, fire them. Like, most people stop being able to get jobs in their 30s if they're really annoying and entitled and don't do good work. So at this point, millennials have track records. So if they have a bad track record, don't hire them and don't promote them. And if they have a good track record, then promote them. But like bitching about them, whatever, like the only people who would be bitching about millennials at this point are people who are such bad employers that they don't have a choice except to hire bad employees.
I find that interesting because I feel like in almost every conversation and every conference I'm at, it's all about millennials. Why aren't you talking about generations? Why aren't you talking about millennials? And you're saying like, look, if you're complaining about the millennials, you probably have a crappy culture that people don't want to work for.
Yeah, because the millennials are like 50% of the workforce by now. So if you have a problem with millennials, you have a problem hiring people. Like this, millennials aren't like some weirdo generation that's like coming in and people have to deal with. Millennials are running everything right now or about to. So if you can't get along with them, you should probably retire.
I like that. And so let's say retirement's not an option. What suggestions do you have for companies that maybe need to hear this? How do they fix it? Where do they start?
Well, I don't get it. Is it the problem that millennials hate to work there, or is it what is the problem? I'm not understanding.
I feel like kind of across the board, people like to just blame millennials on the work environment or, maybe how hard it is to find good workers or people coming to work on time. They just kind of like to generalize it. What do you think?
Okay, well, let's just look at that. Like, if you're bitching about that, you have to be at least 45, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how old a Gen Xer would be. So who cares what people over 45 are complaining about, really? I mean, they're at the end of their careers. Most people top out their earning at age 40. And you've got to adapt. By the time you're 45, you don't get to complain. Like, you're either running things and then you can hire whoever you want, or you're not running things and you're going to be working for a millennial in 5 years. This is just seems like, I don't know, just catering to whiners, catering to underperformers. Like, anyone who's complaining about millennials at this point, I really feel like is an underperformer and doesn't deserve to be listened to. Like, give me an example of somebody who is complaining about millennials that is on the upward trajectory of their career. Am I just a total jerk and don't understand things? I'm sorry. Am I being a bad interview?
No. This is interesting conversation because I think it's maybe a fundamental problem in like human resources is we're having these conversations about millennials and maybe the problem is ourselves.
Well, if the conversation is in human resources, the real issue, right, is that human resources is having a hard time hiring. And the reason human resources would have a hard time hiring is either the job descriptions are terrible or the people who are managing are losing all the good people and they don't know how to interview people. But it's never really human resources' fault, right? Because human resources doesn't even have enough power to create a situation where they can't find good people. It's never human resources' fault. Why would human resources probably all millennials anyway? Because it's all women, and women don't stay in the workforce past 45.
Well, the average age of a human resource professional is mid-40s, so like 42. So they're kind of on the cusp of millennial / Generation X.
Well, I have a feeling, though, that the mean, like human resources skews lower level. So if you look at the mean, the majority of human resources are millennials.
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that.
So there's no way that millennial human resources has trouble with millennials. And in general, the hiring problems, like companies that suck at hiring, it's not a human resources problem, it's a management problem. So it sounds like it's a bunch of millennials working for overripe managers who won't get out of the way and are impossible to work for, and then blame it on other people.
Kind of like the corporate way, I suppose, right?
Yeah. So the best thing that human resources can do, probably, okay, this is so bad for your podcast. You'll probably edit the whole thing out. But the best thing human resources can do is move out of human resources. because it's a dead end. So either you spend your career servicing people who are shitty managers and never get out of that situation, or you leave and you don't move up, or you can go into a management role. Like if you're in human resources and you can see how to manage people and what good hires need from management, go move into management and manage people.
I like that. It's kind of take the bull by the horns and take a different path.
Yeah.
Like be the solution, not the problem, and make a difference, make a change.
Yeah. There is nobody who's a high performer should be complaining about millennials right now. That game is over.
Well, let's take a bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller Merrill,
Okay.
and you're listening to the Workology podcast, powered by Blogging for Jobs. Today, we are talking about career advice across all generations, kind of focusing in on millennials. My guest today is Penelope Trunk, and you can follow her on Twitter at Penelope Trunk. Penelope, you wrote a blog post titled How to Look Younger for Your Career. And in the article, which I'll link to and the transcript of the podcast, you recommended that 25-year-olds who are millennials begin Botox. Do you think this idea is just perpetuating age discrimination, or what's your point of view?
Well, it would be great if we had the power to perpetuate age discrimination, because then we'd have the power to stop age discrimination. But since we don't, we just have to go with it. Like, I mean, humans have been discriminating against bad-looking people since, like, we were apes. So I don't think we're going to change that anytime soon. So women who make a lot of money use Botox. That's like, you can just, like, look at the Harvard Business Review and see that. So if you start Botox when you're 25, then you don't get the wrinkles to begin with.
Yeah, I guess I should have got
I don't know. That seems like
Botox
coloring
memo.
Your hair.
Yeah,
it just seems like coloring your hair. Like, that was interesting to debate about. Like, when I was a teenager, people would be like, "Don't you think that looks fake? Isn't that bad?" And now nobody really cares. Like, whatever. I feel like it's like that. Or like when I was in my 20s, we'd always talk about should we shave our legs or not. And now I think, like, what the hell? I had such good legs. Why wasn't I just shaving them? So, yeah, just get Botox.
Just get Botox. We should, at the SHRM conference, we should have a Botox booth, maybe. The HR conference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, HR. It's like HR is in any industry that's all women. It's even more important to be good looking, right? It's bad. It's unfortunate that it's like that, but HR is predominantly women, so it's even more important to be good looking. And also, HR is a service part of a company as opposed to a line management part of a company. So in any service role in a company, there's more discrimination based on looks.
Absolutely. Well, which generations in your professional or personal network have been the most helpful to you?
Well, I think it's been who's ever been pushing the hardest for their career. So at any point, like, everyone kind of, their career ebbs and flows. And when someone's gunning really hard in their career, they just provide more value as a network than someone who's scaling back. So, like, when I was working really hard, I was working like 100-hour weeks and flying every week. And so I was just a way more connected person than I am now, even though, I mean, I'm connected and I still work. I don't offer nearly the value as somebody who's working all the time nonstop. So I think the people who work nonstop gives you better value for the network. And so in general, it's people who don't have kids, or people whose kids are grown up, or people who have stay-at-home spouses. But I'm not so sure it's a generation thing so much as where someone is in their life path.
I like that. Like, if you have a partner, like I have a 7-year-old daughter, but my husband is able to flex his schedule around mine, which makes it a lot easier to be able to be gone for 2 weeks at a time for work-related speaking events and conferences and the like.
Yeah, so people who have a partner, the partner that gets the priority in the relationship for their career, provides more network value than the person who picks up a sick kid. And the person who can work late every night provides more value than the person who goes home to take care of kids.
What type of advice can you give maybe to somebody who's a recent grad and just kind of starting in their career?
Well, I think it's really different for men and women, and we have to stop pretending that's not true. So women have 10 years to do a career full force, and then they have kids, and the kids really throw women for a loop. So women need to go out of the gate really, really strong. Men don't get thrown for a loop, and they don't need to have kids nearly as early as women do. So when women graduate, they can't afford to go to Europe and go try writing a novel before they get a job and just bullshit that people do in their 20s because they don't think their 20s matter. So women can't do that because women if they want to have a career, they've got to do it right then. Whereas men, whatever, they can just go to bars and have sex and have a career when they're 25 and then not slow down till they're 45 and then marry a 23-year-old and they'll be fine.
Yeah, but if it was the other way around, 45, pretty much as a woman, your options are limited in terms of child rearing years and the likelihood of you being able to marry.
Can't rely on IVF. You can't the idea that women can wait is just so. We need to just be over that now that we've seen a whole generation of women die trying to go through IVF, and it's so bad. Not literally dying, but it's really, really hard, and it's not very successful. We just don't talk about all the people it's not successful with.
Penelope, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we learn more about you?
My blog. I love my blog, PenelopeTrunk.com.
Thank you, Penelope, for being part of the Workology podcast. And thank you to you, the listener, for joining us today, where we discuss the art and science of the workplace, HR, and recruitment. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, you can visit Blogging for Jobs to listen to all our episodes of the Workology podcast.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller-Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.